Tanaka Ryusei showed his ability. Beast-type ability user, Yatsuki. A giant monster hundreds of meters tall appeared before Lu Huang and Liu. Lu Huang's eyes narrowed, and he felt an astonishing pressure from the monster in front of him. He covered his face with one hand and laughed wildly. A torrent of black magic energy overflowed from his body and rose into the sky like smoke. At the same time, his body underwent visible changes. His height rapidly grew from 1.6 meters to over 2 meters in the blink of an eye. His fair skin began to turn dark, his arms and fingers grew longer, and his palms lost their human form, transforming into demonic claws. His fair, porcelain doll-like face also developed crack-like patterns, as if it might shatter at any moment, with large amounts of black energy seeping out from the cracks and wrapping around his body. Bang! 2 huge demonic black wings pierced through his combat suit from his back and spread out violently. Lu Huang spread his wings and rose directly into the air. Because of the love and honesty ability, Liu also shared the ability to fly, and 2 transparent wings grew from her back, following behind him. The captain of the demon squad, Gluttony Lu Huang, a trait system ability user. Ability code, Great Winged Demon. The test was over, and Tanaka Ryusei and Lu Huang unleashed their true power. Lu Huang's right hand, the great demon sword made of white bones, was also stained black, as if it had come to life. Boom! Black flesh wrapped around the sword, and a fierce vertical pupil appeared at the hilt, its eyes still moving. Kill! The 8 heads of Yatsuki roared fiercely, then tilted back and charged at the great winged demon in midair. The 8 heads were wrapped in sharp white barbs, looking like 8 long swords. Lu Huang held the great demon's sword in his hand and rushed into the sky, facing the 8 heads of the Orochi snake. The collision of forces was so fierce. He clenched the great demon's sword with both hands and slashed at each of the heads that rushed at him. The sword's edge swept across, and the scales on the snake's heads began to fall off. However, the enemy had 8 heads, and each one moved as fast as thunder. If one were to look from afar, it would resemble a massive pile driver relentlessly pounding the tiny figure in midair. There was no fear in Lu Huang's eyes. Instead, his eyes turned red, and he fought even more fiercely. However, in the process of this tug-of-war, he still suffered a great loss. He only had 2 hands and a sword, while his opponent had 8 heads. Hiss! He slashed at the neck of one snake head, and blood spurted out like a waterfall from midair. 2 snake heads, one on the left and one on the right, had already surrounded him. The celestial demon flapped its wings and quickly dodged their attacks. But snake heads attacked from above and below. Tanaka Ryusei's ability index was already higher than Lu Huang's, so even with Liu's blessing, he couldn't gain the upper hand in the fight. As 2 close-range mutants, even the slightest disadvantage would be magnified infinitely. Boom! 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 When Lu Huang was hit hard by a head, it was followed by a barrage of attacks from the other heads without a moment's respite. Lu Huang was thrown violently into the air and fell to the ground like a bullet. Liu followed closely behind, white light flashing in her eyes. Love and sincerity. Love is devotion, giving everything you have to heal the wounds of your loved ones. Lu Huang sank deep into the ground, but his injuries were quickly healed by Liu. However, Tanaka Ryusei didn't give him a moment to catch his breath. The 8 heads aimed at Lu Huang and Liu like pile drivers, then with a simple backward tilt, they lunged forward crazily. Lu Huang lay in the deep pit and raised his right hand when he saw this. The red color of his pupils became even more intense, and his normal pupils twisted and turned into terrifying vertical pupils. A black and red light quickly gathered in the palm of his hand, finally turning into a ball the size of his palm. Magic Cannon. This force burst from the palm of his hand and shot toward the body of Yatsuki in the air. There were indeed 8 heads, but only 1 body. Yatsuki was caught off guard and was forced to take the full brunt of the attack, causing his body to recoil a short distance. Black smoke swirled around his chest, but when the smoke cleared, there were no wounds to be seen. Only his scales were slightly deformed. Beast-type ability users of the divine beast species would obtain the purest and most powerful abilities. Lu Huang shot up from the ground, with Liu closely following behind him. We're at a disadvantage in close combat. With a body like that, even if it's slashed with a sword, it might not be fatal. What's more, we don't know which head is its real body. Liu reminded Lu Huang. Lu Huang stared at the huge monster snake and said coldly, if we can't find it, then just cut off all 8 heads, right? Yatsuki heard these words and laughed coldly, arrogant brat, I'll kill you now. It adjusted its posture slightly and charged again. Its attack method was very simple, without any fancy moves. It used its pure, powerful strength and enormous size to crush its opponent. Lu Huang's fighting style was also extremely simple, fight head-on. He held the great demon sword in his hand and rushed skyward. Although he fought furiously, he did not lose his mind and kept observing Yatsuki's weak points. There were 8 heads, so one of them must be the main body. But every head looked exactly the same. How could he find it? If all else fails, let's roll the dice to decide. The battle was over in the blink of an eye, and there wasn't much time to think. Lu Huang chose the safest option, gambling. He would leave it up to luck to decide which of the 8 heads to attack, one by one. If he was lucky enough, he might be able to kill it in one go. Ha! Yatsuki attacked again, and its 8 heads launched a frenzied attack on Lu Huang. Lu Huang raised his left hand and shouted, Magic Cannon. The black and red magic cannons fired at Yatsuki's heads. This time, hundreds of magic cannons flew out from his palm. All 8 heads were attacked. This kind of attack that dispersed energy did not cause obvious damage, but it effectively delayed the Yatsuki's offensive. Then, Lu Huang held the great demon sword in his hand, selected the 3rd head from the left, and flapped his wings and rushed forward. Facing Lu Huang's aggressive attack, Yatsuki's eyes revealed a mocking expression. After being affected for a brief moment, the 8 heads twisted and turned toward Lu Huang. The heads, which were as hard as steel, collided directly with the great demon sword, as if they were not afraid of being hurt by Lu Huang. Soon, Lu Huang's body was covered with wounds from the impact. But he paid no attention to them and stared intently at the 3rd head, bursting with ferocity. Hellfire! His arms were covered in wounds, and red blood flowed down, staining the great demon sword in his hands red. The scarlet vertical pupils on the sword swallowed all the blood without wasting a single drop. After devouring Lu Huang's blood, the sword suddenly emitted a demonic aura. Lu Huang raised his sword with both hands and swung it fiercely at the 3rd head of Yatsuki. A huge sword beam cut through the sky, pointing straight at the 3rd head. Lu Huang's so-called luck was not a shot in the dark. As a captain, he did not rely solely on brute force in battle. Mutants who didn't use their brains would always be low-level mutants. During the previous battle, he had observed that the 3rd head had attacked the least and never launched any risky attacks. This led Lu Huang to conclude that this head was Tanaka Ryusei's weak point. The 3rd head saw the sword energy rushing towards it and its eyes narrowed slightly. It opened its mouth wide and spewed out a white light, which collided violently with the sword energy. Boom! The 2 supernatural powers collided, exploding with astonishing force, and the shockwave rolled out, turning the area within a radius of several thousand meters into the exclusive domain of the 2. The 2 teams of mutants didn't dare to come within an inch of them. In a battle of this level, even the slightest stray aftereffect would seriously injure them. They didn't want to embarrass themselves, so they decided to hold off the other team's members first. Although Lu Huang's attack didn't work, seeing Yatsuki's reaction, a fanatical smile appeared on his face. It looks like I guessed right. His body burst forth with even more terrifying demonic energy, and with a flap of his huge wings, he flew toward Yatsuki's 3rd head like lightning. At this moment, a look of fear finally appeared in Yatsuki's eyes. Don't even think about it. The other heads attacked Lu Huang from left and right, roaring furiously. Lu Huang had a hard time dodging these attacks and had no choice but to take the damage head-on. But behind him, the 2 white beams of light were still connected to his body, replenishing his strength and healing his injuries. Bang! 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 Lu Huang braced himself against the damage from the other heads and forced his way to the third head. The Yatsuki's body was so huge that it was difficult to shake off Lu Huang's attacks. A moment later, Lu Huang, covered in blood, leaped onto the third head. His face was covered in blood, looking fierce and terrifying, but the corners of his mouth were twisted into a crazy smile. Great Demon Sword! Chop! Lu Huang raised the Great Demon Sword high in his hand, and the violent supernatural energy turned into a mixture of black and red, transforming into a violent storm that shot up into the sky. Right above Yatsuki's head, it turned into a huge magic sword more than 10 meters long. Yatsuki's eyes were filled with fear. No! Its body tried to retreat quickly, but its size made it impossible for it to move as fast as Lu Huang. It watched as the giant demon sword slashed down and then cut viciously into its head. Poochie! The white, solid scales were split open, followed by the skull, brain matter, and flesh. The giant demon sword accompanied Lu Huang's crazy laughter as it slashed down. Blood and white brain matter splattered everywhere as if they were worthless. The third head of the Yatsuki was cut in half, and the sword continued to slash down until it reached the bottom. Lu Huang's body was covered with spurting blood and brain matter, and the hot blood made him so excited that he almost moaned. He held the sword in both hands, his face contorted with excitement, and the vertical pupils in his eyes became even darker. It's over! He laughed madly. However, in the next moment, he heard Liu's anxious shout, "Captain, be careful!" Lu Huang was about to turn around when a long neck like a whip struck him, hitting him hard. Bang! Lu Huang was knocked back thousands of meters, crashing through more than a dozen ruined buildings before sinking into the wall of a large building. The Yatsuki had lost one head, but it still had 7 heads left, coldly staring at Liu and the heavily beaten Lu Huang. Too bad, you guessed wrong. A mocking look appeared on Tanaka Ryusei's lips. There are always some people who like to act smart and try to find my weaknesses. But I really like giving people like that a chance. Look, you fell for it, didn't you? Liu closely followed Lu Huang. Lu Huang had lost too much power in the previous attack, and was caught off guard by another heavy blow, spurting a large amount of blood from his mouth. Captain! Liu cried out in pain for Lu Huang, then desperately infused him with supernatural powers to heal his wounds. Lu Huang stood up with his body covered in blood, using his great demon sword to support himself. He stared intently at the Yatsuki with only 7 heads in the distance. At this moment, the Yatsuki seemed to find the severed head a nuisance, and the other heads actually ate it. What a difficult opponent. This is interesting, very interesting. Yatsuki looked over in their direction and let out a deafening roar. The terrifying sound and astonishing momentum greatly boosted the morale of the Yatsuki ninja army still fighting around them. In contrast, the members of the demon squad were not having such an easy time. I wonder how the captain is doing. The enemy seems very strong. Can he be their match? Lu Huang had always been a powerful figure in their hearts. But on Star Island, which of the mutants wasn't a local hero? There were always stronger opponents, so it wouldn't be surprising if Lu Huang was defeated or even killed. Just as they were worrying about Lu Huang, his voice came through the communication system. Everyone, evacuate this area immediately. Leave now, the sooner the better, the farther the better, and don't look back. Hearing Lu Huang's voice, all the members of the demon squad were shaken. Lu Huang, he actually told them to retreat? Then what about himself? Was he going to let himself be surrounded by the enemy? Or did he already know that he couldn't win and was planning to give the others a chance to live? This is an order. Lu Huang said coldly. The team members fell silent. The Jiangnan Region Investigation Team was a military unit. When faced with orders from their superiors, they had to obey unconditionally. After hearing Lu Huang's words, Tanaka Ryusei couldn't help but laugh out loud. You really are a responsible captain. Even knowing that you will die, you are still thinking about the survival of your team members. But it's a pity. Doing so is meaningless. After I kill you, I will chase after your team members and kill them all. Facing Tanaka Ryusei's mockery, Lu Huang's eyes were cold, but he did not refute it. He held the great demon sword in his hand and stood in front of Liu. Liu looked at him with some concern, but still used the ability of love and sincerity to protect him. Yatsuki let out a long cry, and then the remaining 7 heads slammed toward them like pile drivers. Each impact was powerful enough to easily destroy a building. The huge black wings behind Lu Huang flapped, and he shot into the sky, blocking every attack of the Yatsuki Orochi snake. However, having just suffered heavy damage, he was clearly struggling at this point. Every collision was extremely difficult for him to withstand. Seeing how desperate he was to live, the Yatsuki Orochi snake felt a kind of sadistic pleasure. He wanted to torture the man in front of him. Yatsuki's gaze passed over him and landed on the deputy captain, Liu. What a nice woman. I bet she tastes good. He. Yatsuki's eyes were filled with lewdness, without the slightest hint of concealment. He had already made up his mind. He would not rush to kill Lu Huang, but would break his arms and legs and leave him alive. Then, in front of him, he would severely humiliate Liu. Just thinking about Lu Huang's painful and desperate cries, Orochi snake couldn't help but howl with excitement. This look did not escape Lu Huang's eyes. The murderous intent in his eyes grew stronger, and even his terrifying vertical pupils were tinged with blood. Boom! Lu Huang was once again violently thrown away by Yatsuki, his entire body falling into the ruins like a broken sack. Leaning against a piece of broken concrete, he confirmed the location of his team members on the communication channel. Are you all far away? The team members' replies came one after another. They had already left this area far behind and were now being pursued by the ninjas. That's good. Lu Huang said coldly. Boom! A huge snake head plunged into the ruins, directly destroying Lu Huang's position. The Yatsuki Orochi snake looked at Lu Huang fiercely and said coldly, "It's about time you gave up, brat." But just at that moment, the corners of Lu Huang's mouth twisted. Ha. He raised his head and laughed loudly. Yatsuki looked at him in confusion. You're about to die, what's so funny? Lu Huang slowly stood up, covering the wound on his abdomen with one hand. He was covered in blood and looked like he was close to death. But he was still laughing wildly. Liu looked at him from behind, her eyes full of worry. Lu Huang's arms fell to his sides. He said coldly, "They've all left, so I can show you my true form. If any of them are nearby, I won't be able to use its power." Yatsuki didn't understand what Lu Huang was talking about. But he vaguely sensed that something was wrong. Just as he was about to finish Lu Huang off quickly, the man in front of him suddenly underwent a strange change. Yatsuki's eyes suddenly narrowed, as if he had seen something extremely disgusting and terrifying, and his huge body retreated a long way. Amidst the ruins, Lu Huang's face slowly cracked open like spider webs. His delicate, porcelain doll-like face peeled away inch by inch. What was revealed was twisted, blood-red flesh that was so disgusting it made one want to vomit. A large amount of bloody flesh gushed out from his body, completely enveloping him like rotten tentacles. The rotten flesh grew more and more, completely obscuring his form, becoming a large, twisted, repulsive monster. Mutants' mutations are unpredictable. Some gain powerful strength, handsome looks, and special abilities. Others go down the wrong path and become monsters that are neither human nor ghost. I am the latter. Just before Lu Huang's body was completely surrounded by rotten flesh, he slowly closed his eyes. He was a very rare type of negative mutant. Although he possessed great power, he also had a form that made everyone feel disgusted and repulsed. On ordinary days, his handsome youthful appearance was nothing more than a shell created for him by Blizzard City. Now, he was his true self. Demon Squad, Lu Huang. He was a true demon. Love and sincerity emitted an incomparably gentle white light, completely enveloping him. The blessing that love and sincerity provided to Lu Huang was not in the form of power. It was a kind of purification and restraint. It would limit Lu Huang's true power and preserve his humanity. Only in this way could Lu Huang be prevented from becoming a monster that only knew how to kill. A large amount of blood and flesh directly burst the entire ruins. The 7 heads of the Yatsuki Orochi snake revealed expressions of shock and disgust. What? What kind of monster is this? In front of it was a monster made up of a large mass of blood and flesh. Any human who saw it would want to vomit. It had multiple demonic heads and dozens of twisted limbs. Pigs, dogs, horses, goats, and distorted faces screamed in agony. Some arms held bloody heads. Some held long swords made from vertebrae. It represented lust, greed, murder, evil thoughts, and despair, and was a collection of all the negative emotions of humanity. How disgusting, just disgusting! Yatsuki roared angrily. However, this was also why Lu Huang insisted on only revealing his true form when his team members couldn't see him. Scream! The multiple heads of the blood demon let out a blood-curdling scream, and then the huge mass of flesh charged toward Yatsuki. Yatsuki roared in anger, opened his 2 heads wide, and shot 2 shock waves from his mouth. The roar of the snake god. Facing Yatsuki's attack, the blood demon did not dodge at all. It was hit directly, flesh flying everywhere, revealing strips of flesh as tough as octopus tentacles. Multiple arms wielding various weapons slashed towards the side. The strange creature formed from the huge pile of rotten flesh let out a chilling, chaotic cry and charged straight at Yatsuki. Like 2 mountains colliding, they began a skillless melee. Yatsuki's 7 heads roared angrily, tearing and crashing into the great demon's body. Blood and flesh flew everywhere, and the demon heads screamed in agony, but they seemed to become even more excited and launched another attack. The Orochi snake's teeth pierced the demon's body, while the demon's dozens of arms wielded sharp weapons and slashed at the snake's scales. This battle lasted for half a day. Blood stained the entire area red. Both Yatsuki and the great demon lost their minds, their eyes filled with nothing but the will to kill. Some ninjas returned to help, trying to attack the great demon, but they were indiscriminately devoured and became part of the great demon's flesh. In the end, all 8 heads of Yatsuki were torn to pieces by the great demon, and Tanaka Ryusei was completely killed. Lu Huang was also in a bad state. His body was torn to pieces, with broken flesh scattered everywhere, and it was impossible to find his body among the many pieces of flesh. The place had turned into a sea of blood and corpses. In the end, Lu Huang was also on the verge of death. It was Liu who struggled to climb out of the river of blood and flesh and dragged him out of the rotten flesh. Lu Huang's true form was a small, twisted and hideous flesh monster. Liu looked at him with tenderness in her eyes, without a trace of disgust. She took a new skin from the treasure behind her and put it back on him. Lu Huang became the handsome, little man again. "Captain, it's okay, we've won." Liu held Lu Huang in her arms and said gently. At the same time, she had already informed all the team members of the news that Lu Huang had beheaded Tanaka Ryusei and told them all to return. Lu Huang had now lost his ability to fight. Their trip to Star Island had come to an end. The members of the demon squad who arrived here later were all terrified by the scene of corpses and blood before their eyes. But they didn't know what had happened. They only knew that their captain had won the final victory, and they felt joy from the bottom of their hearts. The demon squad took their captain and left Star Island along the established route, returning to the Black Tortoise warship. Zhang Yi sat in an old coffee shop, drinking hot coffee while using his intelligence system to assess the combat strength on the island. On Star Island, the only combat power he could see was that of the captain. Zhang Yi had made electronic cards for each of them and sorted them in his intelligent artificial system. "I killed all the members of Hell's Lock, Thor, Uller, and Medusa. There are 3 left on the island. According to the information provided by the East Sea region before I arrived on the island, they are Billy the Kid, Basaka, and Hershiser. These 3 guys should not be underestimated, especially Billy the Kid, who is close to Epsilon in strength." Zhang Yi reached out and pushed their electronic cards aside. "These are the main enemies we will face next. In addition, there are mutants from other countries in the joint forces, but their strength is far inferior to Hell's Lock. However, we cannot be careless. Especially Neon. I have already killed Amaterasu and Susanoo. I just don't know how strong Tsukuyomi and Kagetsuchi are. Zhang Yi carefully analyzed the situation on the battlefield. His biggest regret was that there were too few mutants at the captain level on the island. Otherwise, he could hunt down more mutants to achieve transformation. Zhang Yi sat in a chair, holding a cup of hot coffee in one hand and thinking about his next move while drinking. Next to him, Spirit Guardian held a coffee pot in her hands, ready to refill his cup at any moment like a maid. As the price for Zhang Yi forgiving her for seeing his true form, Spirit Guardian now had to obey Zhang Yi's orders unconditionally on the island. I think I should stop hunting for now, don't you think? Zhang Yi suddenly looked at Spirit Guardian and asked lightly. Spirit Guardian glanced at Zhang Yi, thought for a moment, and asked, "Is it because you have become the thorn in the side of the joint forces?" Zhang Yi nodded. That's also a consideration. Right now, the entire joint forces absolutely hated Zhang Yi the most. One person killing 3 members of Hell's Lock was a painful loss that was enough to enrage the entire upper echelons of the Columbus Ocean Fleet. Next, if Zhang Yi wanted to take any further action, he would definitely be deliberately targeted by the enemy. However, that's not my main consideration. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes and said slowly. So what if he was targeted? The joint forces had suffered heavy casualties. How could they spare the energy to launch an encirclement and annihilation against him? Spirit Guardian asked in confusion, then what is the reason? Zhang Yi smiled slightly and put down the coffee cup in his hand. Spirit Guardian hurriedly refilled it for him. I just don't like letting others reap the rewards. Zhang Yi laughed. Spirit Guardian immediately understood what Zhang Yi meant. You mean you don't want the East Sea region to reap the benefits, right? Zhang Yi nodded. After landing on the island, I cleared up a lot of trouble for them. I think their people, especially the 4 spirits, are already in Mist Valley. These guys are known as the strongest fighting force in the East Sea region. Let them play their part. Spirit Guardian said, you still really want to get the source of God, right? Zhang Yi scratched his cheek with his right index finger and a playful expression appeared on his face. Desperate? How can I put it? Actually, I'm not that desperate. It's just that I like watching the excitement, and I hate it when others reap the rewards without doing any work. Spirit Guardian remained silent. In Zhang Yi's heart, he had never had a big picture view. No, perhaps for Zhang Yi, only he himself was the most important part of the big picture. Therefore, he could snipe the mutants of the joint forces, but that was only to obtain the origin of the high-level mutants and increase his own power. However, that didn't mean he was willing to do things for others. But if the source of God falls into the hands of the Columbia Navy, what will you do then? Spirit Guardian couldn't help but ask this question. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows slightly. Well, what does that have to do with me? Spirit Guardian's expression changed. If this sentence got out, many people would consider it treasonous. Zhang Yi suddenly laughed and tapped the table with his hand. Just kidding. Don't worry, they won't get the source of God. Spirit Guardian didn't know where Zhang Yi got his confidence from. It was clear that he hadn't participated in the search for the source of God since he arrived on the island. But his attitude was calm and composed, which was confusing. However, Spirit Guardian didn't ask. She knew very well that Zhang Yi didn't trust her. She had no doubt that if she hadn't stepped in to help Zhang Yi deal with Amaterasu and the other 2 and obediently taken the truth potion afterwards, she would already be dead. The only reason she was still alive was because Zhang Yi didn't like to take things too far. If he kills me, then he will completely break ties with the Jiangnan region. I'm afraid Commander Zhu will. Spirit Guardian muttered to herself, not daring to imagine the consequences. After days of closely observing Zhang Yi, she clearly realized that his strength had long exceeded the expectations of the Jiangnan region. A comprehensive ability index of 9,800 points, only good at defense and not good at offense? What a joke. Now, in Spirit Guardian's eyes, he was probably only one step away from the real Epsilon. The outside of the coffee shop was enveloped by a transparent barrier. It was Zhang Yi's barrier. With it, neither wind nor rain could enter, and it could block any means of reconnaissance. Outside the barrier, thick poisonous mist swirled, and the snowflakes floating in midair turned dark green. Zhang Yi looked out the window into the distance. This place was far away from Mist Valley. However, distance had never meant much to Zhang Yi. It's time to close the poison circle. The weak mutants have either been eliminated or withdrawn from the battlefield. The rest are mostly in the vicinity of Mist Valley. The fun is about to begin. Zhang Yi said this because Mist Valley was home to the source of God. It was the source of the poisonous mist. According to Li Zongyu, the source of God was buried deep underground in Mist Valley. Its existence disrupted the magnetic field of the entire Mist Valley. Once inside, it was so severe that it was completely impossible to contact the outside world. Therefore, the joint forces in the command centers of the two major regions of the Huashu Kingdom had no way of knowing what would happen to those who had entered. The more dangerous the environment, the more dangerous it is. We can't always let others pick the fruit. Zhang Yi rested his chin on the back of his right hand and said with a smile. He looked as relaxed as if he had come on vacation. However, not everyone was as comfortable as he was. At this moment, almost all of the remaining people on Star Island had arrived in the Mist Valley area. After undergoing rigorous selection, the mutants who survived were either extremely lucky or top-notch fighters with unparalleled strength. This group of people was destined to fight fiercely for the source of God within the limited range of a few hundred miles in Mist Valley. Among the two joint forces of the Huashu Kingdom, according to the original plan, the East Sea region was supposed to bear the brunt of the fight against the joint forces. However, when they first set out, the East Sea region took a different strategy due to their selfishness. Li Tianyang's idea was very simple. He would let Zhang Yi and the other mutants from the Jiangnan region serve as the frontline force, or to put it bluntly, as cannon fodder to cause trouble for the mutants of the joint forces. This way, the mutants of the East Sea region could seize the initiative and arrive at Mist Valley ahead of time. It must be said that although the development of events was somewhat unexpected. However, Zhang Yi's sudden emergence did indeed put tremendous pressure on the entire joint forces. This also led to three of the four spirits, Azure Dragon, White Tiger, and Vermilion Bird, arriving at Mist Valley first. Except for Azure Dragon killing a captain-level mutant, Vermilion Bird and White Tiger did not encounter much resistance along the way. On the one hand, this was related to Zhang Yi, and on the other hand, it was also their own tactical arrangement. After many people on the island landed, they gradually forgot their original purpose. Zhang Yi ran around hunting mutants. The other mutants believed that they had nothing to do with the source of God, so they turned to capturing the origin elves. Only the four spirits remained steadfast in their mission to find the source of God. Therefore, along the way, they tried their best not to cause any conflicts. However, despite seizing the initiative and arriving at Mist Valley first, the advantage this gave them was not that significant. Mist Valley was too large. It was a huge valley that was once a famous adventure area throughout Star Island. The mountains were connected to each other, and the deepest valley was as much as 400 to 500 meters in depth. The entire terrain was intricate and complicated. Li Zongyu's intelligence at the time only provided the approximate location of the source of God. But now, the place was completely covered by the thickest poisonous mist, and they couldn't use electronic devices or even contact the command center. Therefore, after entering the depths of Mist Valley, Azure Dragon and the others could only explore cautiously. The most useful radar was their mutant instincts, which allowed them to sense the source of God. This was quite a helpless situation. In a mountain stream, a man and a woman were slowly walking towards them from a distance. The man was wearing a white combat uniform. He was tall, about 2 meters tall, and stood tall and imposing, like a giant mountain. The woman beside him was not delicate, but she appeared smaller in comparison to the burly man. However, no one who saw this pair would think that the woman was dependent on the man. On the contrary, the man always lagged half a step behind the woman when they walked. This pair was none other than the Vermilion Bird and the White Tiger, two of the four spirits of the East Sea region. Unlike other mutants, the two of them had formed a partnership and were operating on Star Island. This was extremely rare. Originally, due to the existence of the Source of God, it was difficult for top-ranked mutants to trust and cooperate with each other. However, these two had been working together since they arrived on the island. The White Tiger scanned the surroundings with sharp eyes. In the thick poisonous mist, there were several strange swirling mists that looked like ferocious monster eyes. Vermilion Bird's combat uniform was dark red. In the gray-green poisonous mist, it was not particularly eye-catching, but it was easy to distinguish her identity. She walked forward with graceful steps, and after half a day, she frowned slightly. "We've been here for 3 days, but we haven't found any clues about the Source of God. Mist Valley is so big, and without modern instruments and equipment, we don't know when we'll find it. In that case, won't all the advantages we gained in the early stages be wasted?" Hearing Vermilion Bird's complaint, White Tiger smiled innocently. The operation in the Xinjiang region mobilized half of the region's forces and took 3 whole months to obtain the complete Source of God. Vermilion Bird, don't be so impatient. What's yours will always be yours. Hearing White Tiger's assuring words, Vermilion Bird frowned and said coldly, "But we don't have that much time." Vermilion Bird naturally understood what White Tiger was saying. However, times were different now. At that time, the Xinjiang region was operating within the country, so they had enough time and did not need to face external threats. But now, the East Sea region was fighting for every second to obtain the Source of God. Once the joint forces got there first, all their efforts would be wasted. What's more, there was another thing that was like a bone stuck in their throats. We didn't put much effort into this operation. Instead, the Jiangnan region took care of most of our opponents. Vermilion Bird pursed her lips. "If we fail this time, won't the other 5 regions laugh at us for the rest of our lives? Even if they chose to obey orders, their main task is to find the Source of God." But what Zhang Yi had done during this time was indeed too flashy. He fought against the entire joint forces, slashed and killed many mutants, and almost wiped out half of Hell's Lock by himself. In comparison, the mutants of the East Sea region paled into insignificance. Vermilion Bird was also a top mutant, and she had her own pride. If it weren't for the region's plan, she would have been willing to charge into battle and kill the enemy mutants. White Tiger understood what Vermilion Bird was thinking. He hurriedly comforted her. "I know you feel uneasy. Chaos is indeed very strong, and he has earned us a rare opportunity. But as long as you obtain the Source of God and advance to the Epsilon realm, you will far surpass him. No one will remember a momentary victory. When you become Epsilon, no matter how strong he is, he will only be able to crawl at your feet and look up to you." White Tiger's words made Vermilion Bird feel a little better. But where should we go to find the Source of God? She looked around helplessly. In the area covered by poisonous mist, there were mountains everywhere, and beyond the mountains were more mountains. According to Li Zongyu, the Source of God was still buried deep underground, which made it even more difficult to find. White Tiger frowned slightly and said slowly, "With my puppet beasts, it won't be difficult to find it as long as we spend more time." Vermilion Bird suddenly turned around and stared intently at White Tiger with her deep eyes. "We don't have much time left. I must get my hands on the Source of God. I won't allow any accidents." White Tiger was a little taken aback. "Vermilion Bird, what are you doing?" Vermilion Bird crossed her arms and said coldly, "From now on, we'll split up. That way, we can at least double our speed." Hearing this, White Tiger said with some concern, "That's not good. When we came here, the commander said that I should." Vermilion Bird waved her hand. "I know the commander's attitude. But now we have to fight for every second. Besides," she looked at White Tiger with a sharp gaze, "you don't think I need you to protect me, do you?" White Tiger scratched his head. "I believe in your strength, but with the two of us together, we have nothing to fear no matter what kind of opponent we encounter. But if we split up, we might." Vermilion Bird interrupted him. "White Tiger, that's why I don't like you. You're too cautious in everything you do. If you continue like this, you'll never amount to anything in your life. Anyway, I've made up my mind. Her tone suddenly became serious as she pointed to the left with one finger and to the right with the other. I'll go left. You go right. We'll keep in touch through the puppet beasts. If either of us finds the source of God, we'll notify the other immediately. Of course, to be on the safe side, let's avoid going more than 30 kilometers away from each other. White Tiger wanted to say a few more words of persuasion. But seeing Vermilion Bird's firm attitude, he swallowed his words. All right, let's do as you say. He raised his right arm. His armor was covered in thick, bulky armor several times larger than that of an ordinary person. Captain-level combat suits were specially made according to each person's abilities. White Tiger's combat suit was covered in thick white armor on his arms and legs. He tapped his right arm, and a piece of armor immediately flew off, revealing a delicate white metal cube inside. White Tiger took out the cube and handed it to Vermilion Bird. Vermilion Bird opened the cube with ease, and it quickly turned into a centipede about 30 centimeters long, which then crawled onto Vermilion Bird's shoulder and clung tightly to her combat suit. This was a mechanical puppet created by White Tiger. It was specially made by White Tiger for this kind of environment. Due to the use of old mechanical technology, the means of communication were very primitive and did not require electronic communication. Therefore, it could be used even in the depths of Mist Valley, where the magnetic interference was severe. The only drawback was that it could not perform complex communications, but it was sufficient for calling teammates and confirming locations. Your hobbies are really hard to describe. Vermilion Bird sighed helplessly. Although she wasn't a little girl who was afraid of insects, women still had a natural disgust for them. White Tiger hurriedly explained, it's not like that. It's just because. This shape is very suitable for clinging to various complex terrains. Before he could finish, Vermilion Bird had already turned and quickly walked away to the left. White Tiger looked helplessly at Vermilion Bird's back and, after thinking for a moment, could only walk in the opposite direction. Deep in the poisonous mist, a group of huge, ferocious monsters appeared beside White Tiger, cautiously accompanying him on both sides. However, when the two left, no one noticed a man wearing a brown felt hat hiding behind a dead tree in the distance. Hell's Lock No. 2, Billy the Kid, Yashin Canelo. He had a dry leaf in his mouth, but of course, it wasn't picked from the poisonous mist of Mist Valley. He used to love collecting plants and butterflies to make specimens. The leaf in his mouth came from his hometown. It was a plant with a slightly sweet and spicy taste that was mildly addictive. White Tiger and Vermilion Bird thought they were the first to arrive in Mist Valley. In fact, this opinion was incorrect. Canelo had arrived in this area earlier than them. However, since he also had no clear goal in searching for the source of God, he had fallen into a state of despair. In Canelo's view, mining was the job of miners. What he wanted to do was take over this land and turn it into a mining excavation. Then he could recruit a large number of miners to work for him. Therefore, he no longer considered searching for the source of God, which was inefficient and troublesome, to be his primary goal. Instead, he chose to do the same thing as someone else, start hunting and eliminate all enemies. As long as the threats from the two major regions of the Huashu Kingdom were eliminated, Star Island would naturally become theirs. At that time, they could search for the source of God however they wanted. Even if they failed, they could still take advantage of the situation. They could wait for others to search hard, and then move in to take back the source of God. Just then, the duo of Vermilion Bird and White Tiger appeared in his field of vision.